7 years earlier, had spent quite a few evenings around here listening to it walking around. And then one evening I'd had enough and he'd had enough, and we could hear it in the bush, but we thought we'd go inside. We got up, walked up on the veranda, and as we did, it obviously said, you know, to us, come back, because it started booming and thrashing about, giving its position away deliberately. John turned to me and said, that's it, I totally believe this now. I said, David, my son's been telling me for years about the stories, and now I've seen this myself. I totally believe it. He said, something I've got to tell you. He said, you told me the story about what Merv told you about the children, being attracted to children. They like children. He said to me, and it's the scariest thing anyone has ever said anything to me in my life, he said, listen, Neil, Lindy Chamberlain had problems trying to convince a court that her daughter Azaria was taken by a dingo. He said, if anything happened to your two kids, you got no hope. Now that freaked me. I mean, that was the one thing that really sunk in me more than anything in all of this in terms of advice from Aborigines or whatever, was John putting those two things together. It just freaked us out. And they were right, because a lot of the tape recordings we had would have sounds of it walking in the bush around the house, and in the background you could hear Drew crying. I mean, all the association. The footprint up the top was at Anthony's place, was made about 12 noon on 22nd of February 95, when his wife was breastfeeding one of their many kids, and he said he heard a hand, what sounded to him like a hand moving in an arc across the fibro wall, and through the fibro walls he could hear the sound of something moving outside. He went outside at 2 a.m. being a baker to go back to Kmart to start work, and as he turned the headlights on the car, the light lit up the driveway, which he had only just finished working on that day, raking it out and laying out a fresh load of blue metal dust that Ian, my other neighbour, had delivered to him. I'm returning back from work about 10 or so the following morning. He came straight down to see me to show me that there were 6 footprints, and by the time we got back up there, his kids had demolished 5 of them, although they were still recognisable. One was pristine, the one near the wall. So he guarded that while I went and bought plaster of Paris and I cast it. But I didn't think to get measurements between the damaged ones, because apparently you can work out things like gait and possibly suggestions of height and things from the other information. So it was unfortunate I didn't do that. That's one of the few casts that I've got. I've got 2 of them. The other one's pretty bad. It's so old. It was badly weathered. It must have been probably a month or 2 old. But as you can appreciate here, the conditions aren't very good for casting anything, because the ground's so compacted and hard.
Have you ever thought of putting something?
I've done that too. I did that when the first encounter on the side of the house. When it ran down, I barrow load the sand and put on the track. And what happened as a result of that, checking that religiously for months, is simply the track widened around it. To see why he was possibly doing that, I thought I'd go and do a visit at night time in full moon, or whatever it was, moonlit night anyway. Went out and had a look and stood there in amazement. You could see the sand. It stood out like, dare I say, dog's balls. I mean, it was just sand, and then the track was, widened around it. Yeah. So obviously, as with anything like this thing is very suspicious of anything new. Like, we used to feed it down here too for a while.
But obviously the intelligence to realise what's going on around.
Oh, it's smart. It's not stupid. No, it's intelligent, right? It knows cause and effect. For example, it throws things at me. It's thrown me a tree stump at me one night. I flashed my camera at it in the bush just over there, actually. And the retaliation about 3 or 4 seconds later was next to me. Now, I'll still go under the house. There was a ball root with the stem attached and broken halfway up, consistent with being pulled out of the ground and just thrown like that. And the process of throwing it, whipping it back on the ball root would have snapped it, and it just landed right next to me. And I thought, okay, and ran my way back up. I mean, a number of times this thing's been close to me. It liked playing games and liked scaring the shit out of it. And another occasion, for example, I came down here and walked through the bush with the camera, knew it was somewhere in the general vicinity but couldn't pin it down, plus it was too thick and I thought, waste of time. So I deliberately walked in the open back to the house and slammed the door at the back, pretending I was going back home. And then came straight back down again. And stood somewhere just over here, somewhere in that general area, that scribbly gun, standing there just listening. Couldn't hear a bloody thing. Next minute, right behind me, boom! I mean right behind me, the bastard had stalked me And we used to call that payback. Bang, right behind. Other things we did, like when we used to piss it off, like we have a group of people here hunting around, I used to get a bit annoyed by that. It doesn't mind one or two, one preferably, but when we had the police here in particular...
What were the police called out for?
Oh, I asked them.
Yeah, but under what premise though?
Well, you don't go to the local police station, so we've got a yow unless they, I'll be up straight away to investigate it. It took 3 or 4 months.
So would you say you just had an intruder or...
No, originally it was that.
Yeah.
And then I started pestering them. I came clean with one bloke and he said, look, if you want a result on this, you've got to report everything. So I rang him up every time, so they had to do something about it. Rang him up, 2 o'clock in the morning, in most inconvenient times. I'd come up here until they'd had enough of it. And then one of the guys got sucked into it so badly, we had a bush hire just over there. We used to radio in fake reports so he could be with me on duty. And we'd listen to the damn thing walk past him. And that was quite... He got sucked in totally. He said, But I remember one occasion, it was over the side there, and I said, come with me, Mick. We'll see how close you can get. Because I went right in the bush. I'm pretty close. Come in. I'm sure you'll be right. Come up here. Come on. And Mick came up to the edge of the clearing and said, I'm not coming any closer. And I've heard this. I've had enough. He said, and I've got a gun. Not coming any closer. And that was the end of Mick, but he said he was fascinated by it.
What did the police say in the end about the whole thing?
Well, it depends. I don't know how much to tell you about this. There's some things which are not very good for the New South Wales Police Force.
What parts do you feel comfortable with actually saying?
Oh, they believed it.
Right.
Oh, they believed it. When they saw... things particularly a turning point, major turning point was the red eye photograph. They saw that. They did their own measurements. The sergeant investigating it, obviously very sceptical, sent the constable in as a model to move around and line himself the branches. And the sergeant said, oh, it's a bloody fox, mate. I said, okay, fine, you do it. And then after 5 minutes of intense swearing, he then came over to me and said, this fucking thing's 6 foot high. I said, I told you it would. And then started to change after that. So next thing basically that happened, I found out that from one of my neighbours, he received a telephone call from local police saying, what's this guy like? Is he a nutter? Is he on drugs? What's his problem? So he came down and told me. I was a little bit annoyed about this invasion. It turned out they'd bloody interviewed everybody. I mean, everyone. And what happens, they walked down the street, knocked on the door. Do you know anything about this bloke? Yeah, he's fine. Do you know anything about the Yowie? Yeah, we've seen it. Next, knock on the door. Do you know about the bloke? Yeah, no problem. What did you say about the Yowie? Yeah, we've seen it. So the kids. Next one. He's a beauty. They got a bloke up the end of the road who normally does the investigations on weird stuff, particularly tracking. He's